privacy gone out the window in the United States? Is the country moving more towards a permanent police, permanent surveillance state? Joining me for more from Boston, Massachusetts is Aaron Swartz, founder and executive director of Demand Progress. Thanks so much for being with us, Aaron. The Patriot Act. Today there was a hearing on reauthorization. This month it's up for renewal. The Obama administration pushes for it, says it's important for national security. Why not?
Well, I think we've seen a real reversal from the Obama administration. I mean, this was a guy who, during the campaign, talked repeatedly about how he wanted to repeal the excesses of the Bush administration, specifically the Patriot Act. Now, once he's in office, he's reversed his position and wants to continue it. And I think he should stick with his original promise.
You know, it's funny that you bring that up. I want to go ahead and play a little bit of sound, something that Obama said back when he was campaigning, when he was Senator Barack Obama, and he was doing exactly as you said. He said that the Patriot Act needed to be repealed, needed to end, and here was his criticism about that. Can we roll that?
You know, I taught constitutional law for 10 years. I take the Constitution very seriously. The biggest problems that we're facing right now have to do with George Bush trying to bring more and more power into the executive branch and not go through Congress at all. And that's what I intend to reverse when I'm President of the United States of America.
And oops, he's signed into law extensions to the Patriot Act. So do you think that perhaps, you know, to play devil's advocate, this shows that he got into office and realized, hey, we really need this. This is fighting terror. This is important to our national security, and therefore would justify extending it?
I don't think so. I mean, you know, they just had a huge national security success, the sort of extrajudicial killing of bin Laden, where they haven't been able to show a single example of how the Patriot Act was used to help that. And in fact, they've provided no evidence of the Patriot Act successfully being used to catch any terrorists. And most of its provisions instead are used for the sort of domestic people we saw in the clip earlier, people who are just trying to express political speech and engage in political activity. And instead, the Patriot Act gets abused to use against them. So I think what really happened is not he changed his mind based on the evidence, but you know, he likes having it when he's in charge and not when someone else is in charge, which is why it's so important for people outside the executive branch to really keep the pressure on, which is why tens of thousands of people went to demandprogress.org and signed our petition to end the Patriot Act.
You got a little plug in there, but I want to go back to this. So if it is essential to national security, as the administration has said, and you know, you sitting in your chair just don't know it because it hasn't affected your life, would you be okay with ending the Patriot Act and having perhaps the national security affected, maybe having it affect you, maybe, you know, there's an attack that could have been stopped that isn't. Would you be okay with that in the name of feeling better about your civil liberties?
You know, the bipartisan 9/11 Commission, a fairly conservative group, looked into the question of the Patriot Act, and they said they couldn't find any evidence that the Patriot Act had ever been used to stop a terrorist attack, and they couldn't even imagine how it could be. And they said if the government wanted to renew the Patriot Act, the burden should be on them to show how they were using it effectively. The government has not done that. So even the conservative 9/11 Commission report doesn't think it's necessary to extend it to protect us against terrorist attacks.
You didn't exactly answer my question. So would you be okay with that if it was, in fact, helping national security and would be a threat if it was gone? Would you be okay with that if that made you feel like you had your civil liberties that are your constitutional right as a citizen of this country?
I definitely would. I think the whole premise of our constitutional rights is that they're freedoms that are so important to us that, yes, we take risks, sometimes physical risks, to protect them. I mean, you know, we have a whole system of trials and stuff. Would we be safer if we could just throw people in jail randomly? Probably a little bit, but that's not a kind of country I would want to live in.
There you go. That's a good answer. I want to ask you, you know, the fact that this is up for renewal, the fact that it has continued to be renewed to very little fanfare in the past situations that we've seen, do you think this signifies that Americans just don't care?
I mean, in general, you know, you're right, it has been rubber stamped, but I think we have a real opportunity this year, which is why we're trying so hard to organize activism around the Patriot Act. Usually it comes up, it's rubber stamped for another year, but this time Congress has said there's going to be a real debate about its merits. We're going to look at fixes and suggestions for changes. And so I think there's a real opening right now to try and pull the public in, get them involved in actually improving things.
But at the same time, you don't really necessarily see that. So I'm curious why you think that is if Americans are so up in arms about civil liberties. And when you see the government going into other areas like the Department of Justice saying that they want cell phone companies to store all the information on users, if the Patriot Act is in fact repealed, aren't there just many other ways that the government can infringe on civil liberties and that they're putting that into law?
Well, the public opinion is mixed on this subject. At the same time, we saw the DOJ asking for more rights into cell phone location. We saw a huge public outcry about Apple storing people's cell phone locations. And in fact, there were Senate hearings just the other day trying to get them to stop. So I think when people see it in their daily lives, when they see the abuses concretely, they're outraged and they want to do something to stop it. The problem is that most of the government abuses have been done behind closed doors, and we only find out about them years later through Freedom of Information Act requests.
So do you think that if more people knew about how the Patriot Act was being misused, which there is proof of, I mean, the DOJ found that members of the FBI routinely request information without filing the necessary paperwork. Do you think if more people were aware of that, they would be more outraged? Or do you think people are just kind of asleep on this now and expect it in the name of the war on terror?
I think if people saw the concrete stories of how it's being abused, instead we see, occasionally these numbers and statistics, but most of the details are kept quiet or hushed up or covered up. If people saw how this was really affecting average Americans and how their own privacy was at stake, I think they'd be much more upset.
Well, we will have to see if people do catch on to what's really going on and what happens with the Patriot Act as a result. That was Aaron Swartz, founder and executive director of Demand Progress.